Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football, and welcome to your game week preview. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by fellow lifetime Longhorn, the young prodigy, CJ Vogel. And thanks and shout out to our friends over at Duck Camp. You can see me representing Duck Camp, sponsoring our game week preview, the Longhorns versus the Ohio State Buckeyes. Duck Camp produces premium outdoor goods for the outdoor spirit in each and every one of us. Duck Camp is dedicated to providing the best outdoor goods so you can outdoor good, whether you're an avid hunter or you like fishing, or like me, you just like the Duck Camp gear. It's high quality gear. It's really good. They got a color that is really close to burnt orange, all right, which I love too. But trust me, folks, I got the hoodies now. I got a couple of pullovers. I got some hats. I am a Duck Camp advocate. There's no doubt about it. It is great gear. Go check it out for yourself at duckcamp.com and check out their new fall selection, a brand that understands the culture of outdoor living and the good times and good friends that come along with living an outdoor lifestyle. Thank you very much to duckcamp.com for sponsoring our game week preview. All right, CJ. It's time, brother, to talk about it. Texas versus Ohio State. There's a lot to cover, so I want to get right to it. We'll talk about the Texas offense versus the Ohio State defense first, and then we'll flip the script a little bit and jump over to the Texas defense versus the Ohio State offense. Both, no doubt, the toughest challenges that each phase or either one of these teams has faced so far this year, but for the Longhorns especially, there's no doubt about it. On the offensive side of the ball, going up against a top 5 pass defense, top 5 rush defense in Ohio State, their hands are more than full in this situation.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because I think the strengths of both teams kind of play into the strengths of both defenses, right? And that's, of course, the pass defense and the pass rush for each team. Ohio State, when you look at Jack Sawyer, you look at his body of work off the edge, J.T. Tuimoloau, really talented edge duo, probably the best Texas has played the entire year, right? When you combine their sacks, they're up to about 21 sacks on the season combined. And then, Rod, that doesn't even account for what Texas will have to deal with when they do get passes off. And that's Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom, Cody Simon in the middle over there. He adds an element that Texas uses Anthony Hill in the same variety of blitzing up the middle versus playing in that back 7 and some zone coverages as well. So it's going to be a tall task for Texas. The big key for me here is, will the Texas offensive tackles, will they hold up and give Quinn Ewers in that pass game enough time? Because I do think that run game is going to be limited once again. But we've seen, Rod, anytime Quinn Ewers has time to get his feet right, let routes develop down the field, he can put the ball where it needs to go. It's all about finding that time because, look, if he's asked to extend time against the speed of that front, it might be a long day.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, CJ. I don't know, looking at this matchup, if Texas is going to be able to run the ball against Ohio State. I don't have confidence that they're going to be able to run it consistently. And what I mean by running consistently means be able to execute their bread and butter run concept, which is the wide zone on the outside zone. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it because Ohio State, they have their edge defenders. You just listed a couple of them who are really talented. They help Ohio State essentially, based on Pro Football Focus grades, as the best defense in the Power 4 versus the wide zone. So, yeah, they match up really well versus that. Now, it doesn't mean Texas can't run counter and pin and pull and some other gap schemes or even inside zone. But this is the best rush defense they faced statistically. You can say Georgia may have been better personnel-wise if you want to, but still they're on that level. I don't see them being able to run the ball, so it's going to be, I think, critical that they have a contingency plan when and if, and I think when more than if, the run game is stalled, because they're not going to be able to run the wide zone against this team. And it's interesting. I'm with you. I think that's why I wonder if Texas will try to exploit what I think maybe the only vulnerable spot on the defense, which is the cornerbacks. And now they're not bad. So I'm not saying that this is not the Texas defense. It's hard finding weaknesses, right? Because every level, you're talking about NFL players, and I believe Jerry said 10 of the 11 guys right down their defense are going to be NFL draft picks or end up drafting in the NFL whenever it's their time. The question is, can you exploit the corners? And with your wide receiver, what you're talking about is giving them time. And you got both of your tackles back. You got Cam Williams and you'll have Kelvin Banks. Will they be able to give Quinn Ewers enough time to be able to exploit those matchups potentially on the outside, especially going down the field? I wouldn't look at the deep ball. And one thing that Dylan Gabriel, now the second time around, obviously Oregon, it wasn't as successful. But man, he was 7 of 9 on deep passes, and a lot of those came against those corners. Now those are NFL throws in between the numbers and the sideline. But to me, I'm with you. If you got time to take advantage of that matchup, maybe you got a shot, because attacking the safeties, the linebackers, I think maybe you can get them in coverage over the middle. But I think the best spot to attack may be the corners.
I definitely agree. And look, both are susceptible to the big play, right? I believe when you look at Denzel Burke, 39 targets this year has turned into 30 receptions for 370 yards, a pair of touchdowns allowed, a pair of interceptions gone his way. So maybe more a coin flip for him. He's really solid in the yards after the catch, so you don't see him allowed, a catch and run for most of his opportunities. But where I do think Texas will be able to maybe not exploit, but test and challenge a little bit more is on the opposite side against Davison Igbinosun, the other cornerback that has seen over 700 snaps for the Buckeyes this year. How about 13 penalties so far this year, Rod? Yeah. Really handsy. And I look at it very similarly to how Texas tested Avion Terrell when they played Clemson at home in round 1. Look, Avion Terrell coming into the game had 11 penalties. And Texas tested him 3 times, 4 times maybe deep, right? Matthew Golden drew a pair of defensive pass interferences. Ryan Wingo drew a pass interference as well. 3 pass interferences on him already, and partially maybe, you'd like to see some completions for the yards after catch. But, hey, if you're able to get 15 yards and a fresh set of downs, Rod, sign me up all day. So that's one of the areas that I'm looking at as well, because, look, the challenge that's going to be over the middle, especially in that 3-high look as well with Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom. Woo. Test the 2 guys on the outside, a place Texas has actually had some really solid success, even dating back to the SEC championship against Georgia, even Texas A&M right before that, a lot of which going to Matthew Golden.
Yep, and that is a tendency for Sark. When he finds a handsy cornerback or a cornerback that likes to grab a lot, he goes after him, sometimes with some double moves, but with routes that will challenge their leverage. I love that, CJ. That is a great nugget. And I'm a DB, so I'll tell you right now, I get a penalty in the game, it makes me less aggressive. I just, by nature, I'm already in my own head. I'm like, man, all right, I'm not going to grab. I'm less aggressive. And maybe that is the goal, right? Just make them less aggressive. And then you talk about getting some of those yak opportunities. Let's talk about the dreaded 3-high. For years, I've gone, everybody knows, I've gone in depth and went rabbit holing about the 3-high defense. It had its origins in the Big 12. Oklahoma State actually was the first, even before Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles associated with the origin of it, but he wasn't one of the creators of it. It was actually Glenn Spencer was there. And then the next season, when they hired Jim Knowles, they had already in 2016, I believe before Knowles got there, they had used it already, but sparingly. And then when Jim Knowles came in, I believe Mike Gundy challenged him with, hey, I want this to be kind of our identity defensively. We want an air raid killer. And this 3-high can be an air raid killer. Texas adopts some of it. Remember the lightning package after that 2016 season because Iowa State used it on Texas. Yep. And Iowa State adopted something. Then it's obviously spread throughout the Big 12. And I said 3 years ago, Sark, in order for him to win the Big 12, he's going to have to figure out the 3-high. You have to come up with your own individual antidote to the 3-high. So that's going to obviously be challenged here because it's a different 3-high than it was in the Big 12. Because in the Big 12, you didn't have the 4-2-5 principles that they have there at Ohio State. And, of course, now you have NFL caliber players running this system and a lot of veterans who've been in this system for a long time now. Stark and Jim Knowles faced off one time. That was in 2021, his first season before he went to Ohio State. So if you want to go back and look at that, you can. I went back and looked at it. Didn't find much. But what I would say about attacking the 3-high is this. What makes the 3-high unique, CJ, is its ability to disguise. People forget it's less than 10 years old. This is not a very old concept. So there are not a lot of built-in beaters for it. There are a lot of built-in beaters for single high safeties, 2 high safeties, cover 1, cover 3, cover 2. They got beaters that guys have been learning in high school. They know they didn't practice them in 7-on-7. The 3-high just came along, like I said, in 2016, relatively new. So they don't have a lot. So some teams are coming up with their own kind of built-in formula to be able to beat it. But Ohio State's got the most sophisticated version of the 3-high safety. And this will be the ultimate test for Sark, CJ. Has he figured it out? Does he have a formula for it? I think I know what it is, but it will be tested.
Yeah, I start to wonder where the tendencies are for Sarkisian when it comes to beating the three high. We've seen a lot of the corner routes, maybe some of that flood concept at times to get that, that outside thirds player back deep to cover a man, and then you see the underneath throw in between the bottom flats defender there as well. But I start to wonder where Sarkisian will go if Texas finds a rut, right? We've seen that tight end leak a couple times, obviously most notably against Arizona State in the second overtime right there. Where do you see the tight ends involvement against Ohio State, Rod? Is it still just firmly over the middle? Do you see that kind of being the check down like we saw against Vanderbilt at times? Or is there a beater that you've seen from Sarkisian that's maybe not consistently worked because it's been a pain in the side for years? But is there anything that you've seen from Sarkisian that you hope Texas deploys a little bit more against Ohio State?
There are a couple of things. This is, like I said, this is Big 12 ecosystem, very different than the Ohio State monster you're dealing with now. But when he had to deal with it a lot, I noticed some trends in the Big 12 where he had, I thought, come up with a formula, an antidote for the three high. And essentially what Sark does is he wants to expose it with extreme formations, with heavier personnel groupings. And by exposing, you mean you would have to force it to abandon its pre-snap disguise. And then coming out of the three high, they'll get to whatever their run fits are. They'll get to whatever their coverage assignments are, get closer to them, therefore revealing to the quarterback, okay, this is actually the coverage we're dealing with. The three high is just a pre-snap disguise more than anything. Yes, it's a personnel group, but it's all about the disguise, because after the ball snap, they still get into cover one, cover two, cover three, cover four, same coverages. They're not making up new coverages. It's just a new way to present them. So what Sark would do is he would force it out of disguise with extreme personnel group. The 6-0 line package worked really well. Big 11, Big 12. I went back and tracked it. I went back and tracked the 6-0 line package in 2023 versus three high teams. And you did pretty well. I mean, you were at, if you go look at it overall versus three high teams, over 5 yards per rush, over 11 yards per attempt, 72% completion percentage, over 8 yards per play. Now that's, like I said, that's Big 12 teams, a little bit different than what you're going to be dealing with here. He used to get into a quads set as well. Go back and watch the game versus Iowa State a couple of years ago. He did it against, I believe he did it against K-State, maybe TCU, where he would get into a quads with all the skill guys, its eligible receivers on one side of the field, therefore covering up, like an extreme unbalanced, covering up a receiver, also covering up Gunnar Helm, just making him an extra blocker. And in those sets versus the three high, these are teams that majored and minored in three high, all right, in Big 12 play in that last season for Texas. He basically ended up with 9 yards per attempt.
Okay.
Yard throwing the football, over 6 yards per rush, though. 73% completion percentage. I tracked Pony Package, which everybody knows I love. Pony Package is great no matter what, but Pony Package, I tracked it versus three high teams and also had a lot of success versus three highs. If you go look at it overall, Pony or three high, over 14 yards per attempt, over 6 yards per rush. The completion percentage was down for some reason below 60%, but I'll still take it. Over 8 yards per play. Now, like I said, this is against Big 12 teams. Now, and I'm trying to try empty formation. Now, empty formation has not worked as well as I thought versus three high. You had very mixed results, but there's something going on with Quinn Ewers at the end of the season out of empty formation. So last year, the last 3 games out of empty formation, and empty formation is another extreme, right? It's another extreme formation that will force you to abandon disguise, get to your alignment and assignment. The last 3 games last year, and this includes the Big 12 title game, Washington including that, and also before that, I believe it was Tech was there last year. Tech, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State were the last 3 games of the regular season last year. 73% completion percentage. You end up with 10.8 yards per play. You ended up with over 11 yards per attempt because he had I think a sack and a rush in there somewhere too. In the last 3 games at empty this year, you're at 13 yards per attempt. Your explosive play rate of 35 in the last 3 games. So that's obviously Arizona State, that's Clemson, and then that's going back to Georgia as well. They're empty. It's so I said it's had mixed results last year in the Big 12 in terms of versus 3i, but I would use it in this game because Quinn gets really hot in it for some reason at the end of the season, really hot in it. So that's just. I think I would get extreme. Now, you haven't seen any Big 12, Big 11 package this year. That's the 609 package. None of that at all. We've seen more pony. So I would go pony. I would throw out some of those extreme unbalanced sets. I would throw out the pony package. I would unveil the 609 package again, and I'd use Trevor Gooseby in it.
I think I would too. I think because we saw Texas against Arkansas play 12 personnel with the 2 tight ends on the field for north of 40 snaps, Rod. And, the running game had a big run with Jaden Blue late to kind of put Texas in a position to score late, kind of put that game into a 2-possession lead once again. But for the most part, they averaged 3.6 yards per attempt on the ground with their running game. And I know that if Arkansas is giving you troubles and you've not yet figured out how to run the football against Georgia, even with the 3-high look from Ohio State, they're still going to have comparable speed and physicality up front to what has already given you troubles throughout the entire season. And so I'm with you. I think I'd lean less in the 12 personnel, and I'd like to see Texas go into that 6-man just for that sense of, hey, if we have another 315-pound guy that can move another 300-pound body on the opposite side of the field, I'd rather use that, right, than a guy that maybe can give you 6 yards in a reception.
Yep.
And that's just where I sit at the moment. But that Arkansas game to me spells trouble because that same 3-high look, that was a frustrating game for Texas offensively, right? Yep. Their run game was absent for most of the game. The offense was always just kind of clunky. There wasn't really a rhythm to it. And I fear that if Ohio State's able to get home on the pass rush, it's going to be very much the same. So big game coming up for the offensive tackles for Texas. Big game coming up for the interior guys in terms of setting, some run lanes for the Longhorns. Again, looking back at the Oregon game, Oregon only a negative 11 rushing yards against Ohio State in that game.
Yeah.
If you can't get the run game going, Rod, I think it's going to be a long day.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And I will say this, they've also been running a lot of the inverted with the 3-high. They've been running the inverted look where it basically looks like a triangle, a downward facing triangle, 2 deep safeties, Caleb Downs as that inverted defender. And then they run a lot. They probably been running. I saw it in the both playoff games a lot. And essentially he's able to be a freestyle defender. They give him a lot of leeway. He can come down into the box. He can end up dropping, and then they roll to their coverages from there. It's a freaky look. Not going to lie to you. It's a freaky look. As a quarterback, I wonder, how, because they didn't do that a lot in the first Oregon game. They did it a ton in the second Oregon game. So for Texas, that'll be something to look for. Caleb Downs, basically using him as that free rover in the middle of the field for the Ohio State Buckeyes. All right, going to the other side of things, the Texas defense versus the Ohio State offense. The Ohio State offense has started faster in these last 2 games than any team I've seen watching college football this season. Got up to a 21 and a 17-point lead, basically, in the last 2 playoff games against Tennessee and against Oregon. I think it's key. If you're Texas, you got to find some way to withstand or to stop these quick starts. And I went back, it's been all season long, but I think it's been extreme in the obviously in the playoff games. But they're basically one of the best first quarter teams in the country. First quarter completion percentage, QBR, and yards per attempt, they're top 10. But they had 205 yards in the first quarter versus Tennessee. They had 233 yards in the first quarter versus Oregon. And the games were pretty much done.
Yeah. What they do well and what Texas still kind of struggles with is when they get up by 14 or 17 or 21 or whatever it is, that's the end of the game, right? There's no room for air for the other opponent. And that's what Texas obviously struggled with at times this year. Arkansas being a game, Vanderbilt being a game, most recently Arizona State being another. So that's something that Texas has to absolutely look out for because Ohio State does have that killer mentality. And I do think that is something that will come back to hurt Texas if they go down 2 possessions. But to your point, Rod, not just quick starts, but first downs in general. 28 first downs against Oregon in the Rose Bowl, 281 yards. They were averaging 10 yards per first down. They're just getting another first down after their first down. How do you get teams off the field that's in third down and longs, right? Winning in first and second downs. We heard Quinn Ewers say that earlier in the week. What's one of the big goals for the Texas offense? Winning first and second downs so that you're in third and manageable so that you can continue drives.
Yep.
Obviously, it works pretty well whenever you're able to just earn a fresh set of downs on first down, but that's not always attainable. Now, for Texas defensively, that has to be the goal. Put Will Howard in a position to throw the football and utilize the knowledge and the communication in your back end that can help get off the field, because right now they're rolling. They're playing with as much confidence as anybody in the country, with 1,000 yards against a Tennessee defense that was really good and an Oregon defense that was rather undefeated until they're meeting in the Rose Bowl.
You know what worries me, CJ, to your point about the first downs, because they're just, like you said, they're just avoiding third down altogether. They always say the best third down call is the one you don't have to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and just stay away from it altogether. And to your point, they're doing it with explosive plays. So I went back and looked at the explosive plays. And I'm at 20 plus yards or more. They've had 13 combined in those two games. Here's the scary thing, guys. Texas led the country at the end of the season, and including the SEC title game, led the country in explosive plays allowed as a defense. They only, I believe at that point, they were at 26. So they were basically allowing 2 explosive plays a game. Right now it's at 2.5 or something like that. You know how many 20-plus yard plays Texas has allowed in the last 2 games, CJ?
Oh, no. 10, 12? How many?
It's 12, I believe. I think you're at 12. I think you're at 12 right now.
It's not good. And you know how many explosive plays Ohio State had against Oregon alone? The number 1 overall team in the country. Just last week. 13 for 380 yards, Rod.
Yeah. Yeah. No, everybody's a different definition of explosive plays different. Mine is 20-plus yards. Some people have 15 yards. Some, everybody does it differently. Yeah. But it doesn't matter. It's the same point as you're making is they avoid third down altogether. They're just getting chunky yardage plays. That might be the game. Bill Walsh said the most important stat in football is explosive play margin. Some people say it's turnover margin. Bill Walsh said it's explosive play margin. Say you win the explosive play margin, you win the game. You win it by 1 play, you win the game 60% of the time. You win it by 2 plays, you win the game 70% of the time. That's probably the greatest football mind ever. And honestly, this game could come down to that. Explosive plays. Can Texas limit the explosive plays? Because a lot of those do come in the first quarter. And can they limit the explosive plays? And then can Texas get some chunk yardage plays against them? But that was troubling when I look back. Texas has not had, and the best 2 quarterbacks they played is Clemson and Sam Levitt. But they have not had 2 games where they have allowed this many explosive plays in a 2-game span. Hadn't happened all season, guys.
Yeah, that's.
And he played another good quarterback. Will Howard is the second or best quarterback they played behind Cade Klubnik. What's your thought on that?
Oh, that's a good question. Look, I think Cade's been the best quarterback Texas has played this year. Obviously, Carson Beck didn't do much of anything in the 6 quarters that he played against Texas. Sam Levitt, I think, might be a more challenging quarterback for Texas than what Will Howard will present. Now, the issue is Texas got pressure on Levitt. Levitt just made it very difficult for him to get down, right? 31 pressures on the year, or on that game in the Peach Bowl. That was the most pressures Texas had on any quarterback they had faced this year. The issue is they only had about 2.5, 3 sacks that went for about a loss of 6 because he was so elusive. Will Howard's a good mobile quarterback, but is he as quick? Does he have as much burst in the short distance as Levitt?
He's not twitchy like Levitt.
He doesn't, right. Yeah. He's not that kind of guy. No. Now, will Texas be able to beat the Ohio State offensive line? They faced pretty good linemen already this year, right? Michigan's had guys. Georgia, obviously, twice. You look at Texas A&M, they don't have terrible offensive linemen. Ohio State's been banged up as well. So where I think that Texas can exploit on the offensive line
Agreed.
is in the middle. I think Vernon Broughton's in for a big game. I think Alfred Collins is in for a big game. Of course, Seth McLaughlin, the center for Ohio State coming into the season from the transfer from Alabama. Hey, the 2 of them had a pretty solid year against them last year in Tuscaloosa. It's true. Well, he's done for the year with the torn Achilles. So with the revamping and reshuffling of that offensive line, I think that the interior is where you can see a lot of push for the Texas pass rush. And then I also look at where Donovan Jackson is right now for the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Him, right?
What's that?
They moved him around, right?
They bump him around every so often. He's played a lot at tackle so far for the Buckeyes at left tackle. Watch number 74 right now. 18 pressures allowed this year, Rod. If you were to stack the Texas offensive line and the Ohio State offensive line, that'd be dead last amongst the starters. So keep an eye on him. If Trey Moore, if Barron Sorrell are able to get a push on him, I think that's coming from the blind side of Will Howard. That might be something that Texas is able to benefit from as well.
Good point. You gotta earn the right to rush the passer, and that means you got to stop their run game. Because I'm with you. I think you can exploit that offensive line now, especially with all the injuries in pass protection. But you got to stop their run game right now to be able to do that. And they got two dogs in the backfield that can run the rock in Judkins and Henderson. Here's the interesting thing, because they have flipped their run game identity in the last 2 games. And I thought it was really interesting too. So, and Pro Football Focus has brought this up as well. I saw Joe Klatt mentioned it too. There are a lot of folks who've been watching the film. So usually they're about a 56% gap scheme team. So they're pretty balanced between zone blocking scheme and gap blocking scheme, gap counters, that kind of thing. And if you go look at it in the last 2 games, they're 2 running backs. So I'm just looking at Henderson and Judkins. I didn't look at anybody else. Based on Pro Football Focus numbers, those 2 guys are over 80% gap and counters, power football schemes in the last 2 games. They have pretty much abandoned the zone block. Now, if they still run some of it, they pretty much now become a lopsided gap power scheme. The strange thing is Arizona State, remember, their prior 2 games before they played Texas, they were also running it. And I think 83% of the time they're running gap power schemes. So it's actually something that they've seen before. And by the way, a lot of this is Dillingham related, actually, because Pro Football Focus pointed out that the highest counter rates in the last 2 years have been Florida State, Oregon, and Memphis. Though they were 1, 2, and 4 in those categories are running counter, because that's what Ohio State's doing a lot of. And there's belief that the running backs coach, who was on the Mike Norvell staff there in Memphis, that he may be one of the folks who maybe advocated that they switch to more of a counter scheme with all the injuries on the O-line. Either way, they're running counters now in the playoffs 48% of the time. Like 48% of their runs are counters in the playoffs. And they ran it 18 times versus Tennessee, 12 times versus Oregon. They're averaging over 7 yards per rush on counter in the last 2 games, running gap power schemes with their 2 lead running backs over 80% of the time. And their explosive play rate on counters alone is 20%. Just like when you play Texas, you got to stop the wide zone. Right now, you better stop the counter for Ohio State. If you don't, they're going to run it down your throat.
Yeah. And Rod, I don't think Texas has played a running back duo as talented as this. So when they get loose, this is not a game to be biting for ankles, right? You know, you got to be coming from the second level, whether it be linebackers, whether it be safeties, coming down ready to hit, whether it be Judkins or Henderson. They will make you miss in space. So this is not a game for missed tackles for the Longhorn defense.
Yeah, that is that. Talk about breaking tendency in a critical moment. That is, you got to give Ohio State some props. The belief is that they did it because their offensive line, because of the injuries, they can't zone block as well. So they've decided, you know what, we're just going to go all the way in on gap power schemes, and it's worked out well for them. So if you stop their run game, or at least neutralize it, get them in the 3rd down, like you were saying, CJ, then you put the ball in Will Howard's hands and ask Will Howard to put the cape on and beat you. He's actually done that a few times this year, but he's 0-4 versus Texas. But he's been really good on down the field throws.
Yeah.
And when he's throwing downfield, he's throwing to arguably the best wide receiver in the country, in some people's opinion, and Jeremiah Smith as a freshman. That's how good he is. He's had his 2 best games of the season in the last 2 games of the season. Been almost unstoppable. They broke Tennessee, moving him around a little bit. Usually he's out wide and only in the slot 15% of the time. In the playoffs, that number has doubled to around 30% of the time he's in the slot. So they're hunting matchups with this young man. But 13 receptions for 290 yards in the last 2 games. That's a big part of what's happened too. So when you do stop the run, then you got another problem that Will Howard's now going to be dependent on Jeremiah Smith. And don't forget also about Emeka Egbuka, who's also one of the best receivers in the country.
Yeah, this is going to be a handful, man. I've been saying it for a while, and I'll say it one last time. I'm sure Texas fans are sick of hearing it, but this is going to be the most talented roster Texas plays because, in my opinion, this is the most talented roster in college football, right? You spoke about it right there. Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Emeka Egbuka combined about 2,700 yards between the three. That's pretty darn good. And again, if you double one, well, that leaves you vulnerable with the other two. And if you keep one-on-one with Jeremiah Smith, well, not many people have won that battle this year. Fortunately, Texas has a really good pass defense. Dorp Award. I'm eager to see what they do to stymie that passing attack because Oregon had no answer for it. Right, it was Jeremiah Smith on a quick dump down into the flats that he caught and went for 50 yards in the first minute of the game. It was putting Jeremiah Smith in the slot, and he bullies a safety with a little post corner route. Easy touchdown. What can Texas do? Do they run a 3 high of their own? That's never been a case for Texas, but if you got
they run it this year. They run it out of that dime package, but they run it. They got it.
And I've thrown out the idea, do you see more Jelani McDonald in the box to get a bigger body to supplement the run, but also be, basically a safety playing linebacker for you? We'll see what they do. They had McDonald in the box a lot against Arizona State just to get a bigger body for Cam Scatterbo. But they have to come up with something, Rod, and it'll be really interesting. But fortunately, PK with a lot of time, a little extra time to game plan for, he's been very solid in his career at Texas when given that opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I almost wonder when we see Jahdae Barron get moved around.
Yeah,
I mean he's your best asset there. They're putting, Jeremiah Smith in the slot a ton and getting him matched up on if they want to go big nickel like they did against Arizona State with Jelani McDonald or Jalen Gilbo. They would decide, nope, Jahdae Barron can man the slot. Gavin Holmes is probably a better coverage defender than Gilbo outside, so we're gonna put him outside and then just have a guy who'll be solid against the run. And who also won't be at a disadvantage against the pass in the slot. That's something you could do too. I'm with you, right? You're gonna have to double Jeremiah Smith here and there. You're just gonna have to do it. And Texas doesn't play a lot of man, and we'll see if they have to play man. The only reason they would have to play man is if they have to stop the box because they can't stop the run. Yeah. Which we hadn't really seen that this year. Maybe Georgia later forced Texas to do some of that, but Texas hasn't been forced to do that. Maybe Ohio State will do that. I will say this though, Will Howard, you got to get to him and get to him early because he has been on fire on deep throws in the playoffs versus Oregon. He was perfect on 20+ yard throws.
Wow.
He was 5 of 5. And versus Tennessee, he had his most completions of 15+ yard throws in his career. His most completions and his best completion percentage on 15+ yard throws in that game. So you got to get to him because he is trying to go downtown. They are trying to go deep and vertical with some of these routes. All right, that's I will say this also. The more they can play NASCAR, the better. The more you see the NASCAR package, the better. The reason I say that is that means they're stopping the run. That means you're getting them, to your point, CJ, you're getting them into 3rd and long situations because they only really play it on 3rd and long. So the more you see the NASCAR, the better. And that's the group that can really get after Will Howard and turn him into Will Spill the Pill Howard. 55% of your total sacks and takeaways in the last 6 games have come out of that package. They only play it like 23% of the time situationally. And the Michigan game plan, last thing I'll say, CJ, Michigan game plan, it was brilliant. They just play a lot of deep safety, a lot of 2 high, and they were able to stop the run with a light box. Can Texas stop the Ohio State run game with a light box?
Key. That is the key.
They can win.
Nebraska did the same thing.
Yep.
That game was 21-17. Can Texas do that? We'll see.
That's the key. Can they stop the run light? If they can do that, guys, they'll be able to win the numbers advantage on the back end, keep their safeties deep, and then be able to, shut down the deep, explosive vertical routes from Ohio State. If they can't do that, it's going to be a Herculean task. All right, CJ, great stuff as always. Extended preview, but why not? Because we're this deep in the playoffs and part of the Final Four for the 2nd year in a row. So thank you for all the knowledge, CJ. Appreciate it. Thank you to Duck Camp. We appreciate Duck Camp. Duck Camp produces premium outdoor goods for the outdoor spirit in each and every one of us. And Duck Camp is dedicated to providing the best outdoor goods so you can outdoor good, whether you're a hunter or a fisherman or you're like me, you like to fake it till you make it and just love the great high quality material that Duck Camp is made of. You can go to duckcamp.com and check out their new fall selection. We appreciate appreciate them for sponsoring our game week preview. Hopefully, this is the first time this season where I ain't gonna lie. I don't know if we're gonna be back for another game week preview. I'm not sure, CJ. I've been pretty confident every week that we will be back. This week, I'm not so sure if we're gonna be back.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Thanks, CJ. Until next time, hook 'em.
Hook 'em.